Hello, fight fans, and welcome to the Combat Challenge podcast. My guest today has been competing for over 20 years and has had over 50 fights in MMA, Muay Thai, K1, and kickboxing. He's also competed in over 100 grappling matches in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Judo, and submission wrestling. I haven't finished there, my friends. In MMA, he was the 2 times strike and submit British champion, the 2 times strike and submit European champion, the 3 times 10th Legion European champion. He then focused on K1 and kickboxing, where he was the Explosion super middleweight champion and the ICO super middleweight champion. And to top it up, he was the UC MMA kickboxing champion. He is also a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt under Leon Negao and the head instructor of Itaipava Jiu-Jitsu. Mr. Pete Irving, thank you so much for joining us, brother.
That was a hell of an announcement. You should be a ring announcer.
Pete, I'm so grateful that you've joined us on this podcast, man. The amount of experience that you've got in MMA, in not just the mixed martial arts, but the striking, the grappling, the jiu-jitsu. We got some stories to tell, brother, right?
Yeah, we sure do. We sure do.
So the first thing I'd like to know, Pete, this MMA and jiu-jitsu journey, can you talk us through that journey and the timeline from a young age, what sort of sports you got into and how you ended up where you are now?
I really wasn't a sports guy. I was kind of, I think I was like a bit of a victim of the way the education system works with the way that physical education works. But basically, especially in working class schools, I don't know what it's like in the rest of the country, but I think it's pretty similar. In working class schools, if you're not good at football, if you don't like football, they tell you sports is not for you. I hated football, and I don't really know why. I don't know why I hate it with a passion. I still, it's not really my game. I don't really like team sports. I'm an individual sports guy. But here I am. I've got my St. Pauli Football Fans Cup. St. Pauli's an anti-fascist football team from Hamburg, where I go to Hamburg a lot, and they've got a northeast branch of the fan club because they're a black and white team too, but they're like a real passionate anti-fascist club. So I've been there like a few times, the St. Pauli Stadium, stuff like that. But football's not really my game. Anyway, my point was, if you're not good at football, if you're not on the football team, you don't play on any of the other teams either. I used to have a basketball net. My mother played basketball. So we had a basketball net. I was probably the only kid who had a basketball net. And I could shoot hoops. I ended up being too short. I was no good. I wasn't going to be any good at basketball either, I'm like 5'8" on a good day. But yeah. So if you're not good at football, then you'd consider that sports is not for you. There's maybe a bit of track and field, but you get there's a bit of cricket, there's a bit of this. But if you're not good at football, you don't get picked for the team. And by the age of 13, if you're not excelling, they kind of tell you sports is not for you. And then, so ironically, I think I was probably the only guy in my school who ended up being a professional athlete. So yeah, I think that's one of the things that I love about jiu-jitsu, about MMA. Maybe not so much Muay Thai. Actually, being short kind of screwed me on Muay Thai. But you can, any kind of build, you can be great. Any kind of build. You see, look, Daniel Cormier is short and chubby, world champion. You get guys like John Jones is big and tall and long and slim, world champion. It doesn't matter who you are. You can excel in this. So yeah, I think that's one of the things that appeal to me. But really, really the appeal is the individual sports. I couldn't play on the team. And then I just went straight into fighting. I think normally I tell people I used to be a punk rocker. So I explain, it's the same kind of story that everybody has. You get into some fights, you come off worse, you feel humiliated. Maybe I was a little guy, I'm not little now, I'm average now, but I was a little weedy kid, and so I was a soft target. But I made myself a big target because I was a punk rocker. So I had a big Mohican and leather jacket and all that sort of stuff. So, Newcastle, not the most enlightened place some of the time. I love Newcastle again now. But at the time, Newcastle was a bit of an ignorant place, it felt to me, and I would get in trouble because people just abused me every day. You go into a shop, anytime you walk out of the house, I was getting called names. Sometimes people would spit on me, throw things at me. Sometimes people just walk up and punch me without any reason. So I was getting into fights all the time, and I wasn't coming off very well. And then the one time I had a fight with a guy in a bar who was going around and he was just abusing everybody. He was like a rockers kind of bar, there was like heavy metal kids and stuff like that. And this guy, the doorman shouldn't have let them in, but I think they knew the boy. So he came around and he was going up to everybody, calling them names. And I was just saying unkind things to them, and he looked at me and said, "You look a fucking freak." And he had some beer bottles in his hands. So I took the beer bottles out of his hands and I cracked them on the head. and I thought they would break, like a stuntman in a movie. And they just didn't break. I said, "Oh shit," and he didn't go down or anything. And he cracked me right off. So the doorman took me outside, and he must have been their friend because they brought him up to have a straightener with me. And I didn't know how to fight. I just didn't know what I was doing. So I grabbed a hold of him. I tried to pull him over the edge of a barrier that went down into a multi-story car park, because I kind of figured if I can turn him so he lands on the bottom, he'll die, and I might survive. And it made me think, like, what? If I knew how to fight, I could definitely do this, because I was willing to kill him and I was willing to die just to win. So I thought, if I just knew a little bit, I could be good at this. So I went, and started learning. And then luckily I got out of that mentality, because I was doing things like that. I was lucky, really, because I used to carry a knife in my pocket. I got so upset about getting abused and things like that. I'd walk around with a blade. And so I look at these young guys who are getting in trouble and doing bad things now. And I try to remember back how I felt at that time and what, and it was just pure insecurity, that I had a blade in my pocket. And one day I was there and I had it in my hand, and some boys came past me and I thought, I'm going to do them. Maybe I would have been, a murderer, and maybe they would have killed me back. Maybe they had a blade on them too. And luckily it didn't come to that. And when I realized that, I was like shaking afterwards, and I went home and I was sitting down and I was thinking, this isn't me, like I'm not that person. I didn't come from a bad household, like I didn't have bad examples of why the fuck am I a guy who's walking around with a blade in his pocket. It's just because I lived in a rough place and I was afraid. And I thought I just felt so ashamed that I was so afraid that I would contemplate doing something like that. And so I threw that knife away, and I found a gym and I started training jiu-jitsu, and that was the real beginning.
And which gym was that, Pete? And if you can talk us through there, like which gym it was and what, how you ended up from there going on to competitions. And then at one stage you went across to Brazil. So if you can talk us through that timeline, please.
So the timeline, it's a little bit convoluted because there wasn't MMA gyms. There really wasn't the sport of MMA. My first exposure to MMA was through, like, I got a VHS of Brazil Vale Tudo. I think it was like Brazil Vale Tudo 6. Joel Oliveira was the champion, but it had that amazing fight on with Jorge Patino and Macaco and Pelelandi, and like where they're like, I think like Macaco still got like his earring in or something, like he's got like a diamond earring, but they're like, they get up in the middle of the fight and they kind of stop fighting and they square up. Like it was like the most macho thing that you've ever seen in your life, and they stand there looking at you like going like, "Come on, son, come on, bro." It was absolutely ridiculous. And I couldn't, but I was looking at this thing. I was thinking, I cannot believe that people have got the courage to do this kind of thing. Like, I just wanted it to be me so much, Like, probably if you look at the fights now, you probably go like, "Oh, I bet, I'm sure they're still good, but it probably wouldn't be so impressive, But like, you've never seen anything like it. I know, like, a lot of the people like Din Thomas and things like that talking about having similar experiences, but it was just mind blowing. Guys who come up now, like I kind of feel sorry for them, because it's the fact that it's great that it's popular and that it's normalized, but like the pure romance of it, like they don't know how it felt to have this revelation. I couldn't believe this was happening. But anyway, there was no Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I got really lucky. I couldn't find work because of the way that I looked and my attitude wasn't great and all that sort of stuff. And one guy gave me a chance, and he was he's the mayor of Newcastle now, unbelievably. Like very good person, very like leftist, good guy. But he gave me a chance, he gave me a job when nobody would give me a job. And he had a jiu-jitsu club. It was like traditional style jiu-jitsu, This was the thing. It was like, basically it was judo, but instead of sports gripping setups, it was more like self-defense setups where people would throw punches, but it didn't have a competitive format. So in the end, like, that was actually invaluable to me. They told me like, just to move, just to fall safely, you know, ukemi and things like that. And I still keep that in even now. You know, I abandoned it for a little while when I'd start teaching guys that I didn't teach them the basic ukemi, you know, the break falls and forward rolls and stuff like that. And I thought, we'll just get straight in. Because I used to look at all these guys, the black belts, throwing each other and doing really dynamic things. I was like, I want to do that. And they were like, no, you go on the beginners, man. You roll forwards, roll backwards. Because I didn't have good physical control. And so then I eschewed that completely when I started teaching. I said, I'll get straight into stuff. And the guys couldn't do it. They didn't know the lefts from rights. Or, you know, maybe they did. They weren't that physically stupid. But they didn't know the left from right when they would turn upside down. They didn't know where the feet were while they were in motion. And all these things are absolutely essential. So now I put it all back in. I do the exact same ones that I got taught when I was a white belt in traditional style jiu-jitsu. But anyway, yeah, what I wanted was to compete. So I had a friend from the punk scene who was a Brazilian guy from Sao Paulo. And I started talking about jiu-jitsu, and he said, oh, yeah, I'm a blue belt with Creso de Souza. And Creso was like one of the guys from the great team, you know, the legendary Carlson Gracie team of the 1980s, early 90s, you know, like Mario Sperry, Bustamante, you know, like all those guys. You know, and Creso was one of those people. And he's telling me, he said, oh, yeah, Creso fought Dan Henderson. And I was like, Dan Henderson? That was amazing because Dan Henderson was the Pride champion at the time. He was unbelievable. So when I met Creso and he comes down the street and he's this little guy, like smaller than me. And obviously, you know, I had little man syndrome. And I thought, this guy fought Dan Henderson? I couldn't believe it. And he was this little humble figure, you know. But when we started training and he put his hands on me, I was like, my God, I never felt anything like this. It was another complete revelation. You know, so I told him all the same stuff, you know, going, it's my dream to train in Brazil. It's my dream to be a fighter. And I bet he's heard it a million times and probably keeps hearing it a day. And he went, yeah, sure, yeah, come and train with me, son. So I did. I packed up everything. I got together all the money that I could. I didn't have any kind of life here to leave anywhere. I didn't have anything. So I just packed up and I flew to Brazil. And I got there and I called him up. I said, hey, Creso, it's me, the kid from England. I'm here to train. He's like, oh, okay. Well, there you go. And this was the incredible thing because I didn't have any talent and I didn't have any money. And Creso just trained me. He sorted out a place for me to live, made sure that I had food in my stomach, and he trained me. And I don't know why. And I was like, well, what do I owe you, Creso? Like, when am I going to pay you? And he said, it's okay, we'll work it out later. And I really owe him for that. I really, really do, because I wasn't getting any breaks, you know, like, if, you know what it's like when you're young, you know, like you're full of hell, you feel like the whole world's against you, you know, and yeah. And then for these people who were basically complete strangers to totally help me out, I couldn't believe it. And I thought for ages, why did Creso do this for me? Why? And he made some videos recently. It's really great. Unfortunately, if you don't speak Portuguese, it's no good for you. But it's on YouTube, and he set out this series of videos where he's talking about about the old days, great stories from the Carlson Gracie times. And he does this one where, and Creso was a tough guy. You know, he's like old school, like, and like Brazilian, like South Americans, they're macho people, you know, like they're not touchy-feely, you know, like everybody in Brazil, like, they hug and all that sort of stuff. They're tactile, but they're not touchy-feely, you know, like, and he shed a little tear, you know, and I thought, I never even seen him. I've seen him like laugh, seen him like get mad. That's it. Like, there's not, like, everything else is just stone face, you know. And he cried a little bit, and I couldn't believe this story. Like, in terms of, like, Creso was like double poor, you know. He's a favela kid, you know. He came from absolutely nothing. And Creso tells a story about one day, like, Carlson had asked him to, like, cover some. He'd given his money away to a homeless guy, and then the bill came for the acai or whatever they'd been eating. He said, Creso, give me like 6 hours or whatever. And that money had been his bus fare home. So Creso was stuck there in Rio. You know, he used to go down during the week, train, and then go back up home on the weekend to Petropolis, the little city where I lived. And he didn't have the bus fare anymore, but he couldn't go and ask Carlson and say, like, give me my money back, you know, because Carlson's the master. But Carlson just forgot, because it was like a tiny money for him, you know, like for normal, unless you're really in poverty. And so Creso was starving. He's lying there, you know, and he was just trying to go to sleep so that he didn't have to eat. And Carlson said, what are you doing, son? And he explained the story to him. He said, can't believe it. Come on down. And he split his food with him, you know, and this made Creso shed a tear. And I thought, like, you you don't know that feeling unless you've really been hungry. I mean, I know all fighters, we do weight cuts and stuff like that, and you think like, you think you're hungry, but like when you know it's coming, it's different. It's different. You know, after this period of time is up, I've got all the food that I need. Like the promoter's going to provide. I'm going to make some money. I've got it in the cupboards at home. When that's not there, you don't, unless you've experienced like that real poverty and you really are hungry and you don't know when you're going to eat again. That'll bring a tear to the toughest guy's eye. When a guy shares what he's got with him. And then when he's telling these stories about Carlson, about why he was a great guy, not because he showed a great technique or because he made a great team. It's because he's a great guy, because he had love for his boys. And I thought like, okay, that's why he gave me this kind of kindness. That was the point. And so like now I always think, I owe it. I can't pay it back to Crazy. I didn't make it to the UFC or anything like that. I was kind of hoping like I was going to buy him a Harley Davidson. That was always the thing that I wanted to do, because he always wanted a Harley. He's got a Yamaha, but he wants a Harley, So I thought if I get rich, I'm going to buy him that Harley. And I never did. I never made it. So I haven't really got anything to give Crazy. But he doesn't really need he's okay. You know what I mean? He's got his history and his life is all right, So I always look for the next guys, like I look for the kids coming up behind me and I think like, does this kid need something and can I give it to him? Because I owe it. That's the only way. I can't pay Cresio back to him. I have to pay him back. And Jamie, the guy who gave me my start, the guy who gave me my first job, gave me my introduction to jiu-jitsu, he doesn't need my help. He's all right. Like I need to find a kid who's me, and I need to give them the same treatment that those guys gave to me. That's the kind of point of it.
How cool is that to have that sort of a link where from Carlson, he did that to your instructor, that stayed with your instructor's done that for you, that stayed with you, and it will hopefully continue, so you're kind of giving back in a way without physically or anything tangible, if that makes sense.
That's precisely it. Like I don't know what my potential is as a coach, because a lot of it is dependent on the talent that comes through the door. So I may create world champions, and I might never get there. But the one thing I can guarantee, I know for a fact that there are going to be some people who do need a little bit of help at a certain point in their life, and if I can give it to them and they give it to the next guy, well, that's the best that I can do. When you're young, you think you're going to change the world. Like you want to, you see all the problems and you think that like the previous generations didn't know what they were doing, but you could be the guy to fix it and all these romantic things. And then you get older and you get jaded and you start thinking, nah, fuck it. But actually, you just have to limit your ambitions. Just these small concentric circles, and hope that you kind of pulse something out there that makes things a little bit better for one guy, and he might make it better for the next guy, and have a little impact in this way. So it's not changing the whole world, but to be honest, when you look at it, people who change the whole world, they change it for the worse. Positive impacts generally tend to be these small scale things. So that's the best that I can really hope to do. And if that means managing to get a guy with a world title around his waist, or whether it just means that he does a little kind thing for somebody else. I got a great story actually. Like I never made any money off any fighters, for years and years. Like I lost money on them. I didn't, and they weren't making like big bucks, so I didn't take the 10% for the trainer's money, but mostly it was a dead loss. And the first time that I ever made any money off a guy, I tried to give him it back, and he left it on my table. He hid it in my house before he went home on the plane to his place. And he's one of the kids from Cresio's, and he'd been fighting. He was a Brazilian kid, but he'd been living in Europe. Real good guy. And he kept telling me, saying like, I've always admired you, Pete. I've always admired you. I'm going to come and train with you. I said, now, what do you mean I've always admired you? Oh, he was being weird. And he came over to train. I set him up a fight, and I said, come over for a little while. I'll train you for a couple of weeks. I'll help you train, and we'll do the fight. And he kept saying, I've always admired you. I said, thought he was, I really thought he was being weird. So I go to pick him up at the airport, and he puts his hand on my knee, like saying, like, I'm gonna tell you why I always admired you. I think, like, what the hell are you gonna tell me, bro? And he said, "You don't remember me, do you?" I said, like, well, I know you. I know you because I've seen you, we're friends on Facebook and this, and Grez would tell me about you, He said, no, man, we met before. So, oh, yeah. He said, yeah, I knew you wouldn't remember because I was just a kid. It's like, yeah, I'm sorry, bro. It was such a long time ago and I've had so many punches to the head. I can't remember what happened last week. I can't remember what happened this morning. He said, yeah. He said, well, what happened was I was sitting down at the end of training and everybody was going for dinner. And you said, why is that kid still sitting there? And I said, like, well, they told me, so he doesn't have any money to come for dinner. So what? I've got money. My English money, like I wasn't rich, but my English money was worth 6 times as much then. The exchange rate was really good. So it was like 60 eyes to the pound. And a dinner, a good meal would have cost like £2, something like that, like a full dinner, enough for a day. I said, no, tell the boy to come. I'll get his dinner, like I got some sponsors money. So I was like big time because I had like 300 quid's worth of sponsorship money or something like that for, So yeah, just bring the kid up, buy his dinner, no problem. And I thought nothing of it, because you wouldn't. Why would you? Like you just don't want to leave a kid out who's part of the team. But it turned out that his father had died the week before. And the last little bit of his money, somebody had stolen from him. And that was the only thing that he had to eat that day. And I thought, like, I'm not telling the story because I want to say, I'm such a good guy because I pay for a kid's dinner that costs £2. But what I'm trying to communicate is that, like, I got really jaded, when I was dealing with people who disappointed me and let me down and kind of stabbed my back a little bit. And I just thought, fuck them. I'm not going to help anybody else. I spent loads of effort. I spent lots of my own money. I never got anything back. Why am I bothering with these guys? And this kid turned up. He contacted me. He said, can you help me? And when he came back and he told me the story, and I thought, you know what? You got to keep trying because you don't know who's going to be the kid. You don't know who's going to be the guy. The guy that you think is the prospect, like winds up letting you down. And a kid that's just sitting in the corner, just a young boy, turned out that was the first time I ever made money on a fighter. Because he split the purse with me, and I didn't even want it, but he hit it because he felt like he owed me. So I spent £2 on the boys dinner, and he gave me £300 back. Well, and it's not like I'm not trying to sort of explain like this is like, oh, this is how karma should work, that you should make a profit on karma. You know what I mean? I just kind of mean that like whenever I get jaded, I'm looking that these little things keep coming back into my life that I think like, okay, I need to keep trying, and it wasn't all a waste of time.
How old were you, Pete, when you went to Brazil, and how long did you stay there for?
So I went to Brazil when I was I think 23 or 24, and for a couple of years I bounced back and forth because I had the visa waiver game where like you could stay for 6 months, and then I'd come back, I'd make enough money, and I would go back again. And to be honest, I sort of intended to do that indefinitely. Like I just loved it, and the exchange rate was so good that like basically I didn't have to work when I was there. I could just go there, I could just train. I did, I wasn't living the high life, but like I didn't want to go party anyway. One of the reasons why I didn't go to Rio de Janeiro, well, like to be honest, the training is really great in Rio de Janeiro, but there's too many distractions. It's like when you're 24 and there's nightclubs and there's girls and there's beaches. And in Petropolis, it was, well, number one, it's a little bit safer, but there's not so many distractions. It's a little bit up in the hills. Petropolis is like, it's called Petropolis because it's the city of Emperor Pedro. And so when the Portuguese got there, it was a little bit too hot for them in Rio. So they went up the hill a little bit and built the palace of the emperor, where they could all hang out in their, cravats and whatever they get up that they would wear in those times. So that was it's this really, really beautiful like colonial town. The city center is just like the whole thing's just a picture postcard. And it's a small city too, I kind of like it a little bit more. It's about the size of Newcastle, so that was the place where I chose to live. So it's Petropolis, the city of Peter. So that's where Itaipava is. That's why I got this ridiculous name. What happened with Itaipava was like Itaipava is the region of Petropolis, where Cresro's gym is, where he lives. And I had this logo that was my logo with I in the middle for Irving. And then when I finished fighting, I thought, well, it's not about me anymore. It's about the guys. But I didn't want to give up the logo because I loved it. It was a great logo. So I thought, what starts with an I? And I thought, oh, okay, Itaipava. But then I didn't think, like, nobody can say Itaipava. Nobody can spell Itaipava, even Brazilians. Well, Brazilians know the name Itaipava because it's a famous beer. There's a brewery in Itaipava. So you get an Itaipava beer. But yeah, it's like, it's the worst, it's typical me, worst bit of marketing ever. Nobody can spell it. Nobody know. Yeah. Anyway, well, that's the history of Itaipava. That's a part of Petropolis. So it was really like a tribute to Cresro.
It sounds like, Brother Pete, that Brazil played a significant part, in your martial arts journey. Can you share with us, if you can remember, any of the highs, which I'm sure there'll be loads in Brazil, and if there were any lows that kind of stay with you whilst you were there?
So, I mean, of course, one of the things that was great about Brazil was, like, training was incredible, especially for the time. I mean, I'm sure it still is now. Even if you come from an English gym now, I mean, if you're in London, like, maybe not around where I am, like, I'm really lucky. We've got, like, there's like one other black belt in my gym, a guy who came from London. We've got 2 black belts. That's like, that's a big deal. Still, if you go to London, you're gonna have 5 or 6 black belts on the mat every session. You're gonna have 7 or 8 brown belts in a normal jiu-jitsu gym, like, but at the time, you had a blue belt up here. It was like Hicks and Gracie coming down. Dave Elliott had been in London. He learned with Mark Walder, and he came back to Newcastle. He was in Newcastle lad. He came back, and honestly, it was like Hicks and Gracie had rocked up. I mean, he's a very good practitioner. You know what I mean? But, like, for the time, he was, like, absolutely mind blowing. So, like, that was the greatest thing. So, but when I went to Brazil, you go and just train in a normal place and it's full of black belts. And I kind of thought, like, okay, they're going to be doing these crazy, funky techniques that I've never seen before. But actually they weren't. They were just, it wasn't what they did. It was the way that they did it. And that stayed with me forever, because, as an MMA fighter, I was completely, like, A-specialized. I'd be the worst guy in everything. I go to the wrestling gym. I suck. All the Iranian cats would just pin the living daylights out of me. Like, I'd be in the Muay Thai class. I'd get boxed to bits. So wherever I was the worst guy. But when you put it all together, I could figure out a way to beat, because I didn't have very much talent. So I figured, like, if I get good enough at everything, I can figure out a way to corral the guy into the thing that I'm better than him at. And that was a reasonable sort of strategy. But with jiu-jitsu, I became very, very highly specialized. Like, I know loads of stuff. Like, I can explain it, but I kind of do it. I've got a very small handful of things, and increasingly got better at funneling people into those particular pathways. So this was the thing that I really learned from the guys there. It wasn't so much what they did, but the way that they did it and the intention with which they did. I had this incredible grip strength. Like, when you feel the black belts put their hands on you, it wasn't kind of this wishy-washy sort of thing. They put a grip on you, and you feel like, my arms, that's their arm now. Like, they were completely in command, like, and it was like, it's terrifying, like when you never felt it before. I know, like, people probably look now and they laugh at, like, like Art Jimison tapping from the mountain, hoist mounts him, and he taps out because he didn't even get hit. But you remember what it's like the first time that you got mounted, and he's like having a panic attack. You feel like you're going to die. Nobody's even done anything to you yet, but you're so dominated, so controlled. So that was the thing that, like, it wasn't so much that I really wanted to dominate other people. It was that I wanted to, like, refuse to allow myself to be dominated. That was the more the thrill of it. It wasn't like I wanted to hurt anybody else. I just wanted to make sure nobody could hurt me. So that, I mean, this was, but actually, the training now that you can get in the UK, you can get great training. You can get really, really good here. You can find great teachers. I mean, God, Roger Gracie lives in London, right? But the thing that was really, really valuable about it was, like, living in Brazil was a completely different cultural experience. Like, I experienced life, like, as an immigrant, being unable to speak English. So this is the good and the bad, like, at the time it was actually quite lonely, like, I used to go to the movies on a Sunday just so that I could hear people speaking English, something familiar, and you can't communicate properly, and then especially when you're young, you're a little bit sensitive. So like guys would be making jokes and they'd be looking at me, and I couldn't understand what they were saying. And I think like, he's taking the piss out of me, and I would try to, I would like maybe get into some fight somewhere, and sometimes in the gym. Buddha, I used to go around Lord Creswell's gym. There was a really nice guy called Buddha Adalberto de Souza, and he was like, I think he was world champion as black belt, as a heavyweight, but just such a lovely guy, like he wasn't a rough guy. He was very, very soft spoken, And one of the guys started like provoking me a little bit, and I took my gi off and I was like, trying to have a fight with him in the gym. And really, and when Buddha came over, I thought he was going to kick me out and tell Creswell not let me come back and all this sort of stuff. And he just took me to the side and sat me down and gave me some wise words, and give me like a little bit of like old man's wisdom and schooled me. He didn't shout at me or anything like that. He just put his arm around me, and I try to remember these things, when I see guys kicking off and I want to, just shout them down. And I try to remember these guys will give me these little lessons, life lessons. Like, to be honest, I mean, I can remember some of Buddha's classes actually. Like, I can't remember some of the techniques that he taught me, but mostly the same with Creswell too. Like it's not the technique that he taught me that I really recall. It's the way that they did it and the little lessons that they put in. Like, like I was a hothead, like when I was a kid, and I was always wanting to fight. I would fight anybody for anything because they look at me wrong or anything like that. And Creswell starts telling me this story about he's on a bus, and two guys are smoking cigarettes, and everybody's complaining, saying, put them out, and they're going, vas a poder, like saying like rude things to them, and Creswell gets up and goes over to talk to the guys, and two of the kids know who Creswell is, and they go like, no, it's Creswell, he's gonna go and kick their asses, he's gonna kick their butts. And Creswell goes over and goes, boys, I've got asthma, and I would really appreciate it if you wouldn't mind just waiting until the bus stop to have your cigarettes. But they looked at him with the scars on his face, and and so like, shit, this guy, he says it like, I would really appreciate it, boys, and gives them a get out. He doesn't raise his hands and shout at them and put them into a corner. He just lets them say, okay, bro, since you asked nicely, yeah, I'll do it, because they knew he was going to smash their face in, but he didn't let everybody else know. So Creswell goes and sits down in the post going, why didn't you kick their asses? And Creswell says, I got what I wanted, to put the cigarettes out. And I thought and I didn't really exactly know why he was telling me the story at the time. And then later it dawned on me, it was like, because I was going nuts about trivial things, because somebody would say something provocative to me and I'd want to have a fight with him, and he was just letting me know like that's the way to behave. You don't, if you're a tough guy, you don't have to do the violence. So it's just, just little lessons like that, like it seems like nothing. Like now when I tell the story back, I just think, yeah, that's obvious, of course. But when I was 24 years old, like I needed to hear that. Otherwise I could have got myself into all kinds of trouble. So these are the values of that I got from living there. Even when I hadn't where to live, Creswell took me from down from Sao Paulo. He took me to Petropolis. And so I go to the gym and they paired me up with this guy, Pedro Galvão. Pedro he's a great jiu-jitsu player, but he was just like a hobby guy. He just had loads of talent, but it was just his hobby. But he was the only guy who spoke English. Nobody else in the whole fucking town spoke English, but Pedro did. And so they paired us up, and then Pedro says, where are you sleeping tonight? I said, like, oh, well, I'm gonna stay in the gym. I was like, you can't stay in the gym. So you just come to my house. I was like, oh, I thought he was gonna let me stay at his house for the night. We got back, he lives with his mom and dad. At the time, of course, with his mom and dad. And they said, oh, hey, I brought this guy. He's going to come and live here. And they went, oh, that's great. That's wonderful. We always wanted a brother for Pedro. I thought, these guys are nuts. This is insane. Can you imagine being a stranger back there? I could have been anything. I could be a thief. I could have been any kind of thing, And they just said, oh, yeah, you come. I said, you're going to live here. He said, oh, yeah. How long are you going to stay for? A couple of months? I was like, well, yeah. He said, great, cool. You stay here. I mean, this kind of can you imagine this kind of hospitality? Like that, I just couldn't believe it. And these people treated me like I was a member of the family. They cooked meals for me and gave me a room in their house. It was just, I'm still staggered. I still can't believe that people would do that. But that's what it did. Just being part of a jiu-jitsu club meant that I went from homeless to just like practically having a family. It was absolutely unbelievable, So this was a really incredible really incredible time in my life.
And
Well,
I bet those people, Pete, you know, I'm making an assumption, but I bet they weren't really well off, and you know, it's not like they had a guest house or something for you to stay in. You know, they were kind of incorporating you within their daily life and their daily income, right?
yeah, for sure. Yeah, you know, like I mean, they were sort of quite fortunate for Brazilian level, you know, but they fed me their food. There wasn't like wasn't nothing for them, you know, and they gave me a place in the house. There wasn't nothing. It's not like they weren't millionaires, you know. They were just ordinary working class people, you know, and I think that's probably it, you know. Like when people have an excess, they can't really imagine the life of anybody else, you know. Like you know, you see these guys, you know, like these little like Tory boy clubs where they're like the initiation is you burn a 50-pound note in front of a homeless guy and laugh and that sort of stuff. You know, you see these guys, you know, it's because those people, you know, they're not born inherently better or worse than you or me, you know, but they've been raised in such a way that they can never imagine themselves being in that situation. But you're right, working class guys, we walk past that boy in the street and think, could have been me. If I'd zigged when I should have zagged, one extra bill came through the door that day, you know, some tragedy happens, you just can't bring yourself to bounce back from quick enough. That's me. That's me sitting in the doorway with my cap in my hand. You know, so this kind of this kind of kindness, you know, it doesn't really generally come from people who are too far removed. You know, it's mostly a working class thing. You know, where and that's the beauty of it. They're like, I'm working class from England, when met working class from Brazil, and they looked after me. You know, they must have seen something of themselves in me. You know, and this is the point. And what I'm driving at, like I have now like a scheme at the gym for asylum seekers. The asylum seekers come and train until they get the right to stay and work. They just train for free. And so I didn't do this as a talent recruitment thing. You know, like I hadn't really thought into it properly. But actually, as it turned out, some of the greatest champions that I've had have come through this scheme. You know, so but the point is to kind of put it out there that just, you know, because I realized I couldn't speak English. I mean, sorry, I couldn't speak Portuguese when I first got there. Like I couldn't communicate barely at all for the first sort of 3 months. It's a very, very lonely experience. But when I was on the mat, the primary mode of communication wasn't the language. You know, like Crezo told me a lot of stuff just by putting my hand there and just by doing it to me. So like feel like this and look like this, you know, and then you can just learn one more arm, wrist, you know, like this kind of, you know, and you start to learn like this. So most of my Portuguese was formed around learning body parts and you know, push, pull, grab, you know, this kind of stuff. You know, so yeah, I kind of figured like, okay, this is the best way to do it. That, you know, we can bring guys in. And then actually, what it turned out was we had some incredible kids. I had one kid who was like the Dagestani national wrestling champion. It turned out walked through the door. I've got one guy now, incredible guy, Michael Chamu, comes from Cameroon. Had some political problems in Cameroon, and came across after a combat sambo tournament. So he's the Commonwealth combat sambo champion, and he came to the gym, and it turned out he stayed for a few years, being like a real core member, you know, and a great champion. Won every single fight by knockout or submission. I really think he's got the potential to go a very long way. But the point.
I think I saw that there was like a promo clip about him. I think, was it Revgear that did a promo clip about him? Is that the chap that you're on about?
That's right. Yeah, Revgear made a very nice promotional video showing off Mike. But this is the thing with Mike, you know, like I've been really, really disappointed with a lot of the people that I trained earlier on. You know, to be honest, when I first started being a trainer, I was only really the coach because I was like the head training partner. So what I was trying to do was like train guys up to be my training partners. You know, I just tried to make them good enough that they could push me so I could push myself and then go and win fights, because I didn't have the training partners that I needed in the place where I lived. So I wasn't really a good coach in that respect. I was a good coach because I just knew more techniques than the other guys, because I had the advantage of going and training with Crezo and learning this combination of jiu-jitsu and wrestling. You know, and then we gripped some guys. I had a great Muay Thai gym up here, so we managed to put a package together. But really, like, I was a good coach just because I could just give guys the nuts and bolts, you know, and I could see like, okay, well, he's making a mistake there because he doesn't know what to do. I say, look, do it like this. And if they don't believe me, look, I'll kick your butt because I know the stuff. Not really, actually. I thought I was a good coach, but I wasn't. Actually, what I was I had access to the best. I attracted the best talent, and I knew more stuff than other people, you know. And some of the stuff that I did that made people think, oh, he's a good coach. Well, it's commonplace now. Maybe I just stumbled on a few things, or I figured out a few things that were sort of innovative at the time, and which are just kind of standard now. But anyway, the guys that I coached, I wasn't picky and choosy. Just anybody who walked through the door, I trained them because I wanted good training partners. I didn't care about anything else. I didn't care about who they were. I didn't make good judgments about them as people. And then I've been really, really disappointed in the way their lives went, you know. So that's why I don't really advertise or anything now. I just let people find me. If they want to find me, then I think, like, I don't know, God put them in my hands, then that was meant to be. So Mike turned up just out of nowhere. And you don't know what somebody's like. You got to give them a little while. And Mike's this kid who's like, he's the toughest, most intimidating guy on the mat. But I turn around, everybody else just walked out the door, and Mike's sweeping the floor, mopping the floor, you know. Like, I have to kick him out, you know. So it's okay, I'll do it tomorrow, you know. But that's a good guy. It's a good sign, things like that. And then the first thing that he did when he got successful, he said, okay, my guy's back home, my gym. I thought he's a loyal guy because he told me about his coach back home, and Wesley. And he said, oh my God, Wesley's a good guy, told me a lot. I want to help the boys who are coming through now. I want to send them some stuff, you know, because Mike didn't have any gloves, so we gave him a pair of gloves. And someone else gave him a pair of gloves, and someone else gave him a pair of gloves. So now Mike's got 3 pairs of gloves. So what does he do? Sends 2 of them to Cameroon. You know, like, that's the point. You know, he wants some other boy to get them. You know, I thought, oh, that's a good guy. I says, okay, guys, everybody, let's all get stuff. So Mike collected all of this stuff, and Rev Gear, who made the film, like, they didn't ask for any advertising. I gotta put that out. I'm not like sort of obliged in any way. But Rev Gear donated a ton of stuff. So this Fight Store on, I will give an ad. Sorry, I hope you don't mind me giving an advert on your show. But Fight Store in Team Valley, they didn't ask for anything. They didn't advertise that they'd done this. But all the extra stock, end of line stuff, a couple of things, some samples, whatever they sent loads of, like, brand new, really, really good gear, like really, really good stuff. You know, like heavy bags. These guys are making heavy bags out of like Hessian sacks and stringing them up and taping them together. You know, I've seen the videos. They sent like a beautiful, beautiful heavy bag, and Mike sent it all there. You know, I thought, okay, right. If this guy becomes successful, this guy's going to do good things. You know what I mean? He's got a good heart. So,
and is that Fight Store Pro under Alex? Is that whose place it is?
That's correct. That's the place. So, like, Alex is a character, you know, Alex. Yeah. So, but people don't know they do these kinds of things. You know, like, they do stuff that helps the MMA community. You know, and they'll give things away, or like a guy who's just in need of a thing. Like, okay, this is a guy who's dedicated, and like, we'll help him out with stuff. And they don't use it for advertising. They do it because they love the sport. So I'm not even supposed to tell you these things, you know. Like, I'm not. They didn't ask me to give them some promotion or anything like that. But they do good stuff, you know. Like, they are actually invested in the community. So,
I mean, I watch Alex when he does that gadget in a truck when he's in his Nissan Pathfinder. Funny character, isn't it? So I know who you're on about. Yeah. So, Pete, you've got your gym now. Can you tell me a little bit about, is there any other people there that are helping you out, and what sort of disciplines apart from jiu-jitsu that do you cover under that roof?
So, to a little bit, like my own experience was really built from combining Brazilian jiu-jitsu, Thai boxing / K1 style kickboxing, and some wrestling. So we have a class for everything. You know, because I got uncomfortable with sending guys out to different places. You do your Muay Thai here, you do your wrestling there. You know, and because what ended up happening to me was that I was just completely overtrained. Nobody was I had great coaches. I had Barry Norman, who was my Thai boxing coach, one of the greatest original coaches in the UK, in the Newcastle area. And then I was training wrestling with all the Iranian guys. But what I was doing was I was trying to match them You know, and I think I think Rob Sinclair was saying the very same things, that were all overtrained, didn't take enough rest, sparred too hard, too many times, all this stuff. But I was trying to keep up with the boxers and the Thai boxers, and I wasn't realizing the fact that these guys, that's their session for the day, or that's their session for a couple of days. And I was trying to do 2 days constantly all the time, breaking myself down. So I didn't want guys to fall into that trap. So I can keep an eye on, moderate the sessions, and make sure that they're not, they're not burning it at both ends. So I do a little bit of everything there. But I beg your pardon. That's a lot to handle for one guy. So I do have some help. I got a great guy, one of my fighters, Sam Robinson. He was one of the first guy that I kind of took. I didn't get him right from scratch, but I had him from being an amateur and through professional. Unfortunately, like, he hasn't become as famous as he should have been because he's had a lot of injury problems. So he's only managed to get a couple of fights, but he's undefeated. And so he helps me all the time, gives some of the classes for me. Very lucky to have a chap called Richard Stoneham. So Richard Stoneham is a really, really marvelous boxing coach. He's done some spots so far with the England podium squad, and I think he'll probably end up as one of the England coaches. And he has a few really good amateur boxers. But there's a lot of good boxing coaches out there, but it tends to be like they're so fixated with boxing that they cannot see the entire picture. But Rich is an incredibly intelligent kid. He's a marvelous character, because he turned up at the gym, like, working with one of the fighters that I used to work with as boxing coach, and he looked like he's from North Shields, and North Shields is like one of the rough bits of town, and he looked like Adidas tracksuit, Rockport hat on, and I thought when he opened his mouth he was going to talk like do you put a boxing me, like, I thought he was going to be like one of these guys. And he started speaking. I can't remember what it was, like, just being like a Canelo fight or something like that. And he started speaking with like this extraordinary eloquence. This guy doesn't, like, the voice doesn't match the package. And it turned out he's the most incredibly intelligent kid. Went off, did a master's degree and a PhD studies. Dr. Richard Stoneham now. Like, absolutely incredible guy. And so he's my first choice for anybody that I need to work with, because I kind of I'm like a whole picture guy. Like, I'm trying to see everything. And it's very hard to zone in on real specifics of the nuts and bolts of particular things. And boxing, I love boxing, but it's not my forte. I mean, I'll teach you how to stand right and throw the basic punches right, but there's I'm a blue belt in boxing, and Richie's a black belt. So like I bring him in and I get him to work with all the guys that I work with, and without fail, no matter who they are, like how they're built, what their weight class is. I think this is the mark of a great trainer. You get a lot of good trainers, especially if they're ex-fighters. If the guy is built like them, looks like them, thinks like them, make them like them. Great, they do a good job. But when the guy deviates from that, they can't necessarily, sometimes I struggle, because I was a forward coming pressure fighter. And if I've got a back foot fighter, I'm like racking my brains thinking, what's the right thing to tell this guy? Because what I would do is not going to be the right thing for him. Where Richie's just got this completely what would you call it? Like unprejudiced sort of view, where you can just see like whatever the guy is and work to their strengths. You can communicate with different people, and sometimes I find myself like, people will come back to me and say, like, oh, I've got a question, coach. What did that word mean? I'm like, because I talk to them in the wrong way, it's not even the technique that I'm showing them they didn't understand. It's the way that I said it, where Richie seems to really, really know exactly what to say to the right guy, and then sometimes I used to have this real temptation to like write a book in the corner, give this mighty of advice and guys wouldn't understand it. Where Richie, I really learned a few things from. Kieran Kettle actually was one of the guys that I learned a lot from him being in my corner. Alan Hall was the same. Alan's incredible corner man, would say just the right things, just the right amount. And Richie's another one. He would say just the right thing, just the way pick the most salient point. And so like I've picked up like really like just good little turns of phrases from working with him, where like you'd be able to communicate like a pretty big idea, in a very, very compact way in the right amount of time. So anyway, yeah. So I'm very lucky to have Richie there. Got a great black belt, Daniel Comain. He's really like it's his hobby, like he just trains for fun, but he's incredibly helpful. We've got a couple of guys who are, the parents of the kids, and they run the kids classes. Actually, like I could ban on all day about like how great what. But I think anybody who runs a jiu-jitsu gym is gonna have the same experience. You know, you get these just like some really, really great guys.
It's like when you mentioned Richie, what I could picture is instead of someone giving you all that advice in one long way, he can kind of give you like a compressed, zipped file. So it's there, but you don't have to listen to it all. It's just within that compressed bit, right?
Precisely. Yeah. So I think we were with I got Richie to come with me to when the Hardwick brothers fought in Italy last time, and I was a little bit stressed because Harry's fight wasn't going quite the way that we'd hoped, you know, and yeah, I didn't quite know how to communicate what I wanted him to do. And Richie said, Richie, you got this one. Stepped in, and he just in 10 seconds just gave him the right advice, and things kind of turned around. It's, you know, and it's like Harry knows what to do. You know, that's kind of the thing. You know, like you can't program in between rounds. You can't program into somebody a skill that they don't have. You just have to kind of help them to connect the dots, do the thing that it is that they want to do. You know, and so it was just like a small turn of phrase, and I think it was really, really influential. You know, and it really takes the stress off you having somebody else there that you can rely on. You know, it's a difficult thing being in the first seat in a corner.
Last week I did a podcast with Harry Hardwick and George Hardwick. There's some characters out there, brother. They have like a really kind of dry sense of humor, right?
You know, Harry and George, they're great kids, and I sometimes wonder because of a very regional sense of humor too. You know, because I find them hilarious. But and I wonder, like, think like, are people watching in London and think like, I don't know what these guys are talking about, because they're very, very. I used to live in London, and the sense of humor is very, very different. You know, but if you're in on the crack, that they're really, really funny. You know, like, George, you know, George started. He said to me once, like, yeah, after this fight, so it's been a hard week. I'm really looking forward to having a pommel. You have pommels down there? Yeah, so the pommel is a big thing in Middlesbrough. You know, like if anybody doesn't know, it's basically like it's a pizza, but instead of bread, it's fried chicken, and then it's got this like the white bechamel sauce, and like, you know, I think what it started as, I think it's an Italian dish with like, you know, just chicken with some Parmesan cheese on, you know, like it, you know. But then they made this. It's like Southern fried chicken with like just a big block of cheddar, like right in the. It's unbelievable, you know. It's so bad for you, you know. So it's a delicacy in Middlesbrough, you know. So George says to me, I'm going to eat a full pommel after this. I said, George, I thought you were a vegan. He said, No, I've never been a vegan. I'm more of a vegetable enthusiast. It was the funniest thing I've ever heard. You know, but I don't know if everybody's gonna get the, like, especially like the American audience with it being on Bellator. I'm thinking like, are people gonna understand? I don't know if they'll take how funny they are or not. I don't know. But like that gym's just a hilarious place. Like I ended up teaching down there because I was a teammate with Abdul Muhammad, and basically I sought out Abdul because Abdul was like the scariest guy in my division. And I figured, like, well, number one, I want to learn how to wrestle like him because I was really impressed with what he was doing. He was like Khabib and guys before Khabib. And like a lot of people, I see guys talking now about like, oh, this revelation of Khabib's technique. I'm like, yeah, he's very, very good. He does it very, very well. You're like, well, Abdul's been doing that to us for 10 years. It's just that's that regional style of wrestling. So yeah, so I went down to, I sought out Abdul to train with him, basically so that I didn't have to fight him because I was scared of him. Which was a stupid move because then I realized like I could have got chinned off him once. You know, like instead I picked him as a teammate. I got chinned off him every day. You know, so,
well, I've met Abdul a couple of times, right? And I used to say to him every time, because I used to go to shows and do some official work, and I used to say to him, I said, Brother Abdul, when are you ever going to smile? And he's another one, a man of few words, but he'd give you that look. And he always used to remind me like a miniature version of Randy Couture, right?
Yeah. I got a photo of me and Abdul, and then like every time I put it up, somebody goes, I didn't know you met Randy Couture. Yeah. Yeah.
It does look like him, man. He does. Now, you've had loads of fights, Brother Pete, absolutely tons in striking, just striking, in MMA, in grappling, in judo, jiu-jitsu, and wrestling. Are there any fights that stick out for you that were rewarding? And it don't have to be one that you won. It could be some sort of adversity you might have overcome, and there's something you can share with us.
No, there's a lot, because they all seemed really significant at the time. The biggest fight is always the next fight, But the ones that I won easy were letdowns. I didn't really like them, and I don't know. I've always had sort of ambivalent feelings about fighting, and whenever I would knock somebody out, it took me a minute to celebrate. Like I felt like I was going to cry. I didn't really like it. And the fights that I've really, really liked were the tough ones, the really hard ones. I think one that I'm quite proud of, I fought Tom Stanham. With all due respect to Tom, he's not because he's the most experienced guy or anything that I'd fought. But he was the fight was scheduled with light heavyweight. And Tom was just too big. He just couldn't get down, Like he ended up fighting a heavyweight again after that, So yeah, I can't remember what he came in at, like 97.5 or something like that, And he just came back out and said, like, I can't do it. I can't make the weight, And so I'd loaded my pockets and loaded my bag to get on to make the weight. I was like 79 kilos, So I'd cheated the scale so that it looked like I was close enough, But really I wasn't. So yeah, and. So I'm proud of that because I managed to, I always wanted to fight a heavyweight, and I thought my strategy was good. Unfortunately, it was like right at the end. Like just by the time that I'd got my mentality just right and my focus just right and my technical capacity, just everything came together. The wheels fell off. I couldn't do it anymore. So that was my last MMA fight. So I'm kind of pleased with that. I got a nice scar from to tell the tale. I think the guy that I really liked to fight most was Reza Muradi. I remember, cause I told Hassan, one of the guys we used to train with, Hassan Muradi. I said, oh, I'm fighting Reza Muradi. And he goes, Muradi? Well, it's Muradi. Don't murder the name. So I always remember.
Yeah. I remember that guy, that Hassan, right? Because I once went to see him. And who did you used to train with? There was another guy with him.
It was just me, him, and Abdul was the guys, really.
And that Hassan guy used to say, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna fight on your show, and I'm gonna do this." And then he wanted so much money, and I was like, "Brother, mine's an amateur show. I can't afford you." And he gave me that look as if to say, "Well, I'm still gonna fight," and I just kind of distanced myself from him.
Hassan was the crazy. I've got so many stories about Hassan, but I probably can't tell them. But he was at the weigh-in on one of the 10th Legion shows, on one of Alan's shows. And he was fighting I can't remember the kid's name, but he was a traveler, like real tough guy with his fists, Obviously, Hassan was gonna just out wrestle him, But aggressive guy, So they got there for the face-off, and it all kicked off like Hassan pushed him, and Hassan's brother jumped in. They just it all went nuts, And so Alan just thought, I got to get a handle on this, And really, Alan's a tough guy, but on his own against all, a gang of travelers on this guy and all the Iranian wrestlers on this guy. And Alan gets in the middle and just tells him off like daddy, just like, hey, what are you doing? Messing with my show. And it worked. He was like, it worked great, because he just put the authority on everyone. Well, sorry, So he got hold of Hassan and said, Hassan, what are you doing, man? Kicking off with him, making a scene. I said, he looked me in the eye. It was a face-off, Hassan. You do. That's what a face-off is. What do you think he was going to do? It's like, nobody looks. You look at me. You look at the floor. He was like, this guy was ruthless. Oh, he was absolutely. I got so many stories, but I can't even tell them because it's not for public consumption. Yeah.
Sorry, I broke your way there a bit, brother. Sorry, you were saying about the rewarding fight.
Oh yeah. I forgot. Yeah. Oh, Reza Mad Dog. That guy was a mad dog. And he got right in my face in the I don't think we weighed in together. I can't remember weighing in against him. But he was looking me right in the eye. He was so mean. We had this great fight, I just loved it. It was rough and tough and back and forth. Yeah, and I don't think I won just because I was at home. Like I think it helped maybe, but like it was good. It was a really good fight, And I had him. I think I was like top half guard at like end of the second round. And I lifted my elbow up and I hit him as hard as I could, And I thought like I was going to see him, wobble a little bit. And he looked up at me and he went, "Fuck you," like a bad guy in a movie. Fuck you. Oh, I love this guy. I love. Well, I want to be his friend. Like he was just such a tough guy. And the reason why I liked that fight so much was I didn't have anything else left. And we're trying to get off. Me and him were trying to get off the canvas at the end. We're both exhausted. And like I was forcing myself to stand up because I thought I got to get up first. Like I got to make it look like I'm still got something left to give. And really, all I wanted was just to lie down. And like give absolutely everything. I could not break the guy. Couldn't break him, And sometimes, when you win, normally when you submit out, some guys are like flashy, like they catch something, they've got great intuition, but me, I never did. I was completely systematic, but I couldn't beat guys like that. I had to make them give up first, then beat them, not the other way around, and I just couldn't break the guy, like I hit him as hard as I could hit him, I grabbed him as hard as I could grab him, I put every ounce of my energy in, and as soon as I see these guys like, get the end of the fight and they're repping out push-ups and they're both sitting down, they go, look how much I've got left. I think, well, why didn't you give it while the match was still going instead of like seeing who can do the most push-ups after the match? Like you paced yourself wrong. If you still got something left at the end, you're like, why weren't you trying to still win? So this was that's why that was one of the great ones for me. That it was, and it changed the way I felt about myself. Like I know, like we talk about like, strike and submit was the great old times. I go back to that venue now, and it seemed like it was like fighting at the MGM Grand. Like it felt like such a big deal. I go back now, and it's like sticky carpets, and it's really small. But I felt like there was so many people there. Because like nobody had ever clapped for me before. Like and there's a whole like some hundreds of people clapping for me, and it made me feel great about myself, and I won that belt. It was like a plastic, like not plastic, but like, like a catalog one, not beautiful like they are now, all personalized. It was just out of a catalog, with like some kickboxers on the thing instead of MMA or whatever. But like, I went away for like a day to reward myself to have a break, and I took the belts with me. It's like really sad, but I felt like, but it made me feel like oh man, I'm a champion now, and it really gave me something. And that's I keep talking about like because I'm a coach now. I can't fight anymore. That's how I want guys to feel. When you take yourself and people telling you all your life you're never going to be anything. I remember when I was at school, they tell you like, oh, here's your job prospects. Here's some ideas for you. You could join the army. You could be a bin man. You could be. I'm not criticizing any profession, but like that's not my intention. But what they were telling me was like, the finer things in life, they're not for you. And if you want to see the world, you're going to do it down the barrel of a gun. That's your only option. And then actually this thing, like, gave me some kind of sense of self-worth. Give me the confidence to be who I want to be, see the world in the way that I wanted to see it. And that's the thing that I want to pay forward. But I've got so many stories about fights, like fights where you find out little things about yourself. I got one more just to tell people, like.
Before you tell me that, brother, I just want to mention to you before I forget. Now, strike and submit, I bet you could have got a better belt. But that promoter, Michael Surtees, he was one stingy mofo. So that's why you got that catalog belt.
I used to have two. I felt great. I felt like I was before Conor McGregor, I was the champ. I'd walk around with two on my shoulders. I had a red one and a black one because I was British and European. And then, but I fought the British one twice, and then I fought the European one twice. But then I think it was Colin Fletcher. So I had to give the British one back because you had to defend it 3 times to keep it. I was like, I want to keep. I was so special for it. I still like it back. So Colin Fletcher, if you happen to catch this interview, can I have that belt back, please? I'll buy it off you. Like, it was the only time in my life I felt good about myself. Go on, give me it back.
Right, brother. Sorry, you were saying you were going to tell us a story.
I mean, like every fight, like when you look back at them, they don't matter anymore. It's all history, but especially when you see the guys going so far now, things have changed. They're making real money. but it felt like it mattered so much. But all it's really left, like all the money got spent in a week. But what's left is just those little things that you find out about yourself. I mean, one time I fought Paul Jenkins, and I fought him
Is
twice.
that Paul Hands of Stone Jenkins?
Everybody fought Jenkins. Everybody in, like, doesn't matter if you were like welterweight, middleweight, heavyweight. Jenkins fought everybody 2 times, 3 times. So yeah, so I fought Paul, and I fought him once, and I thought I'd won. I won, like, in fact, I'll tell you what, actually, Paul, if you're watching, I did win, because if you shit your pants, that's a TKO. I need him in the guts, and he pulled his pants, and they made me fight him for 2 rounds afterwards with shitty. He was wearing white shorts as well. Can you believe it? I had to fight the guy with shitty shorts. So I feel like I deserved the winner's trophy just for that, even if I didn't.
I think I remember seeing that footage, you know.
I need him in the guts, and he proved that's a TKO. Like, it doesn't matter if he went down or not. So anyway, he's a great. I got no animals with Paul Jenkins, but this is a great one, right? So this tells you what a cool guy Paul Jenkins is too. But actually, I fought him the second time, and it was probably the first time in my life that I didn't feel like fighting. Like, I really didn't want to fight. I know that I think this is a common thing for a lot of people. When I speak to my athletes, and people have anxieties and nerves about fighting, I didn't. I loved fighting. Like, I had anxieties and nerves about losing. Like, I couldn't bear to lose, and that's why I fought jiu-jitsu, to work all those things out. When it was less high stakes. But actually, once I got going and once I got on the road, I just loved to fight. And I would have fought every single weekend if I could. I was like addicted to it. But this time, I don't know why, but things weren't going well in my life or whatever. I don't know why. I didn't really want to fight that day. And we were driving up to the venue, and I was wishing the car would crash so I had an excuse to not fight. And I never felt anything like that in my life. I felt so ashamed of myself. I felt like I was a coward. I don't know why. It wasn't because I was intimidated by Paul. He was a good fighter, but I just didn't feel like fighting. And I never, ever felt like that before, because I used to wake up in the morning wanting to fight and go to bed at night wanting to fight. I'm glad it's over, actually. It's a hard way to live. But yeah, so this time I got in the ring, and things were going okay, and I ducked under his, I can't remember, he threw a hook, and I slipped under it, and I ducked under, and blood was pouring down his back. And then I realized it was coming from my eye. It was my blood. And so I think it was the end of the round came, and they walked me back, and the doctor came in. The doctor was looking at it going, shaking his head. And he was asking me to talk myself back into the fight. He said, "Can you see?" And if I'd went, no, I don't know, like, that would be it. That would have waved the fight off. And I was thinking in my mind, this is your get out. You don't have to go through this anymore. You can just say, "Oh, I was unlucky. I don't even know what it was. Maybe it was I didn't get hit with like a clean punch or something. It was like a toenail or something." I thought that would be my get out. So I just unlucky. The doctor stopped it. I can get out of this by just going, I don't know. And I didn't. And the voice that came out of my mouth, even though I was thinking I don't really want to fight, the voice that came out said, yes, I'm fine. I want to fight. And, I thought, okay, like, it doesn't matter what's going on inside. At least I know that what I project is always that I want, because normally I did, but this time I didn't. But the best bit of this was, while I was thinking about it and saying, yes, please let me fight, Jenkins walked over and he grabbed the doctor and he went, "There's nothing wrong with that. I'll just chuck a bit of Vaseline on it. Come on. And he chased the doctor out of the ring, gave him a wink and said, "Come on, let's fight." He could have went over and said to the doctor, "Oh, look, that's pretty bad. Nah, you don't want to let this kid fight." But he didn't care about winning as much as he cared about winning the right way, and he wanted to just have a fight with me. I thought, like, that's a guy that I really, really admire. And I wanted to be like that. Now that's the cool thing. Like, I'd seen Paul Jenkins fighting when I was like an absolute novice, and I thought, oh man, I wish I was like that guy. And then in a year or two later, there I was fighting him, and that's a great thing. And again, it's one of those things that it doesn't really matter. It's all history now. But the way that felt for me, like, I want other guys to feel like that. Like, that's the reason why I stay in coaching. It just, I want to give other guys that sensation. It's a hard thing with coaching because I worry a lot about the guys, and I worry about them more now than I ever used to. Because of the way the fighting's affected me. I'm not in a particularly good way physically, and I don't know the full extent of how it's affected me mentally. But I realized that I would, if you gave me a time machine, I'd do it better. But I would just go back and do it all over again because I loved it so much, and I dread to think who I would be if I hadn't had the opportunity. And so I worry about my boys, but I still like I want them to have that feeling. There's just nothing like it.
Brother Pete, you've competed on so many different levels and you're coaching on so many different levels. I want you to give some advice just from your knowledge and experience that you've got. So firstly, people who are either on the early stages of their competitions and they're wanting to compete and they're thinking about competing at a professional level, what advice would you give them? And then what advice or traits that you think would be particularly significant to be a good and valued coach? So there's two questions there. So one, as an athlete, what advice would you give to an athlete who's competing, or as an athlete who wants to coach?
Like I say, I'm still, in spite of everything that I've said, trying to sound positive. I'm very conflicted about fighting. Whenever I have a kid who comes up to me, they're an amateur or whatever, and they come in and say, I want to be professional. I want to try to make a living with this. I always tell them, like, look, if you can think of absolutely anything else in the world, any other profession that you can feel like you can live a full and happy and satisfied life with, go for that. Go for that. Don't be a fighting professional. So, and it's one of those things where, like, people love to hear, your Tony Robbins hype guys saying, like, who told you can't have a helicopter? Who told you can't drive a Rolls Royce? They're like, of course you can. And everybody goes, yeah. And they all get psyched up and everything together. And then they pay the money for the next seminar. And then they walk out the door and they go, oh, fuck, actually, it was bullshit. But they've already paid the money now, so they can't admit it. So they have to go through with it, because it's just hype talk. Right. So, and it sounds great. Want to say, oh, there's Conor McGregor, and he didn't have two nuts to rub together, and his girlfriend stuck with him, and, and he gave up his plumbing apprenticeship or whatever it was. And now look at him. He's living in a yacht and he's the most famous guy. And like, for every Conor McGregor, there's 100 of me. It's shared advice. It's just shared advice. It's statistics. Like if somebody told you gamble like that, you're like this guy going like, I put everything on black, and way I came up trump. That's shit advice. How many gamblers do you know who, like, they tell you when they win, and then you find out how much they lost when they're standing on the Tyne Bridge ready to chuck themselves over because they're losing the house. It's not good advice, and you got to let guys know that you're probably not going to make it in the sense of financial security. So you've got to come up with something else. If you insist that you're going to do this, yeah, we'll do everything that we can to look after you physically, but you got to be smart. You've got to have something else coming afterwards. So one of the things, of course, financial plan. You got to set up your company. Don't blow your money at the bookies or on a girl or something stupid. Like get your money into something. Have a plan for where you're going after fighting. That's it. That's an important thing, not just longevity physically and stuff like that. Everybody's talking about protecting their brains and all that sort of stuff, which is good news. But you got to have a plan after that. But psychologically, you cannot attach your whole self-worth to being a fighter. Right? It's a recipe for disaster. But I was really, really lucky that my daughter came along. I have a family now, so I was something that when I was forced to give up fighting, at least I was something else. I'm mad to somebody else, because nobody's going to give a fuck about you when you don't fight anymore. This is Alex from Rev Gear actually told me the best thing ever. So, like, as a fighter, nobody gives a fuck about you. What people give a fuck about is how you make them feel about yourself. You see, the most obvious recent example, Conor Mania, everybody loved him because they all felt like they could attach themselves to that swagger, that audacity. They could imagine themselves telling their boss to spit shine and that, they felt like that. They felt like they were somehow attached to this. And as a sportsman, you carry people's hopes and dreams on your shoulder. But they can shrug you off anytime they like. Anytime you're not carrying it, you represent their fallibility. It's not that kind of love. It's a very, very fleeting, transient thing. And so if your sense of self-worth is attached to being good at fighting, That's only going to last a very short amount of time. That's all that's the thing that made me feel good about myself. Well, I could kick everybody's butt, so everybody started talking to me nice. Everybody wanted to be my friend. Everybody knew me. Well, as soon as that was up, things changed absolutely radically, and it was a real shock. And I should have seen it coming. Well, and everybody else that comes up behind me, my boys that I prepare, like, I want them to know that. I want them to be able to tell the difference. There's nothing wrong with that. Guys who are fans and supporters and all that sort of stuff and love you when you're winning. But you know the song, right? Everybody loves a winner, but when you lose alone. That's really true. Nearly true. So you got to find them one or two people that lose with you. And I think I lost to Jess Liordan. And it broke my heart. It meant absolutely everything to me at the time. He's just a really good guy, actually. Jess, when I moved to London after he'd knocked me out, was the very first person to say, "Do you need some help, bro? Do you want to get together and do some sparring?" But when he was my opponent, I'd never been knocked out before. Nobody ever. I think I'd had an 8 count once in a kickboxing fight. But I'd never been even down on the canvas. I never took a knee. I could really take a punch. It just put me down. And I remember I came home and I said to my wife, "I wish I was dead. I wish that punch had killed me and I never had to wake up and face this." And that hurt her feelings so much. Like she never really forgave me for that. She said, "How can you say that to me?" So I mean it. I really, and at the time I really meant it. And of course, it's absurd, total overreaction. I couldn't watch that fight for years. I was so heartbroken. And now I think it doesn't even matter. It's just one of those things that happened. But the important thing was that all the people who used to support me, used to buy tickets, but they didn't buy the tickets for the next fight. Well, Alan, I don't know. The message that I got, well, like, cool, right? Okay, what we're going to do now? Back to the drawing board. Like, it's not a big deal. It wasn't even like, oh, positive, oh, I'll get better. No, it's just, okay, cool, next step, rebuild. He just had a plan. He was just completely pragmatic and it made me feel so much better. But it made me realize, like, Alan's not training me because he thinks that I'm going to be the next world beater or he's going to make some money off me or anything. It wasn't anything like that. He's just my friend. He just really cared about me. And Alan's an incredible trainer. I wish I'd done better for him so that I could really show people what he's actually done. But Alan's technique's incredible. Like it's really something else. Like, yeah, it's one of those things you kind of see it. You watch him on video and you don't know what it feels like. Like, same as jiu-jitsu. You know what I mean? Like you can kind of see Muay Thai. You can see, but you can't really see the way that Alan punches. It's this thing that you feel. Anyway, but that's not the point. The reason why I love Alan so much is not because he's a great technician. It's just because he's a great guy. And he still just keeps making me a part of things, and he's absolutely one of the best people that I've ever met. But it was really when I realized, like, when I lost, what a true friend he was, what a great trainer he was, because of his attitude there and how he pulled me back around. So that's what you've got to discover. In terms of advice for people who want to be a trainer, a lot of the time we talk about great trainers. I don't know if we know who a great trainer in MMA is. Talk about great trainers in boxing. Everybody's got their own criteria. Like, the greatest of all time fighter, you can debate about, like, it's because of this, it's because of that. For me, a great trainer, they have to be able to produce champions in multiple weight classes, multiple styles over multiple years. Like your Real Cells, your custom models, people like that. Like, there's an established thing in boxing. We haven't really seen it in MMA because of the speed that it moves at. So when you look at, like, say, oh, it's a great trainer. Well, it's probably the most popular guy right now. You know what I mean? Like, there's probably a lot. I have to say this because I'm that regional guy. But if that one super talented guy doesn't walk through the door, you might never get any light shown on you. Like, I like John Cabinet's fantastic. You see, like, he's produced a lot of very, very good guys. But everybody in the world knows him because of Conor McGregor. You know, and I'm not saying that Conor McGregor might not have been great without John. You know, like what I don't know. It's hard to say. You know, but that's kind of the point. You know, that one guy, you know, elevates you and then shows off all of your other work. You know, so when we see like it's like Fighters Only Awards, you know, and you get like who was the winner? It was Whitman and Gaethje last year. You know, so it was Whitman. But it was because of the athlete pairing of Whitman and Gaethje. And then before it was Dwayne Ludwig, and it was because of the athlete pairing of Dwayne Ludwig and TJ Dillashaw. You know, but those guys just had that magic, that chemistry. It doesn't necessarily get recreated with anybody else. It might never get recreated again. And sometimes I'll look at those guys and I'll think, wow, he did such a great job there. That was such a genius game plan. You know, and then you look at another one and go, actually, is he as brilliant as I thought he was? I'm not sure. Maybe I think I would have told it somebody a little bit different. So what it hinges on is getting lucky with that special guy that shines the light on what you do, you know, and having that magic chemistry with him. You know, like there's some guys like I know all the techniques that they need, but they're just not my guy. They just don't respond to me. They don't like the way that I talk to them. Maybe they need me to shout at them more, shout at them less, be nicer to them, whatever. And they're just not going to be my guy. Maybe they live too far away. You know, like there's all kinds of reasons why you just don't quite gel. You know, maybe you just have one fight that just goes a little bit bad. They can't accept responsibility for it and they blame you for it. Or maybe I gave them some bad advice for just that one, and I would have given them great advice for the next one, but he chooses to leave. There's all sorts of things that can go wrong. So to be honest, you know, I've had some guys who've had like really great victories, like I've had like Mike knock everybody out, Mike Chong, he's knocked everybody out, submitted everybody. You know, like, it's not really because of me, it's because he's special. You know, like, maybe, hopefully, there'll be one where I was the guy who made the difference. I hope that happens. But really, it was because of him. So even though he's my best champion right now, you know, like, it's not my coaching. This is all coaching Cameroon. It's his special natural attributes, his magical abilities. You know, like, that's why he's so great. I think you put him with any other coach, he'd also be great. You know, probably, you know, the best thing that I ever had as a coach, I got one guy who came in for fitness because his wife made him take boxing lessons with me because he was going to die of a heart attack because he was so overweight. You know, he couldn't even get up the stairs without getting out of breath. You know, he couldn't even move his body. You know, like he hadn't, you know, he played rugby as a kid and then just didn't do any sports forever afterwards. I got him boxing. And in the end, he's had 2 unlicensed boxing fights, 2 like, you know, like white collar boxing fights, 3 2-minute rounds. You know, like, nobody in the world would think this is spectacular, you know, if you just looked at it from the outside. But it was what I had to work with to begin with. Great guy, but no athletic potential, no violence in him. You know, felt, you know, you punch you and say sorry for punching you, this kind of stuff, you know. And I managed to get him to fight 2 white collar fights, and he did good. And that was it. Didn't even win him. He just went the distance. You know, like, and I was so proud of that. And I've had other guys that have like won big titles and, you know, other things. Like I've cornered like Jamie Bates and Gory, you know what I mean? And they're, you know, incredible skill level, incredible victory. But, you know, I hope I helped a little bit, but there's a lot of guys who could have helped too, you know, just held the pads for a really amazing guy who already had amazing skills, you know. And so, like, as much as I love to be there, I'm so proud to have my pictures next to Jamie Bates. I can't take credit for that. But the guy who won the Lee, who won the unlicensed boxing fight, well, I was, you know, that was my best bit of coaching, because I don't know if anybody else could have done that. I think that was me that did that, and I think without me, he would never have felt that way in his life. So maybe I'll change my tune if I make fortunes and I get a UFC champion. But maybe I'll still feel like, oh, it was the Fed breweries with Lee with his you know, with his decision loss on a white collar fight.
Pete, thank you so much for being on this podcast. It's been absolutely amazing. And the story you tell, brother, the way you tell it, my friend, is just unreal. Thank you so much for being on this podcast. And I look forward to having you on the next one, hopefully in the next 12 weeks' time, if that's okay with you, my friend.
Oh, I'd love to come back. You're the only guy who listens to me talk.
Pete, thank you. And I'll catch up with you later, my friend. Take care.